Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Moonstrats. This week I'll be covering a Rakoans tribal deck, and just to point out, this deck does require the Fall of Everlife DLC for most of these cards. So this is a swarm style of deck. It builds up a ton of little creatures, and so that will make it a bit weak to burn or anything that gains advantage through combat. It also has a 6 land requirement, and this deck doesn't run any elementals, so it will be a little slower than most, and it'll need some time to get up there. So Rush is a pretty unfavorable matchup as well, but in a lot of matchups this deck can be pretty strong. All of the Rakoans synergize really nicely with each other, so there are quite a few ways that you can build this deck. Some of the strongest cards in here are Rakoan Illusionist. So this transforms a Rakoan into a 4/4 Dune Drake until your next turn, and this is great for a number of reasons. The most obvious being, of course, that you can turn any of these weak-bodied Rakoans into a 4/4 and, dish out 4 damage to something, which is pretty crazy, having only costed you 1 Faeria. But the Dune Drake also has Charge 2 and Flying, so this extends the range of that 4 damage you want to deal, and it also just gives an option to transport a creature somewhere fast and then potentially step on an enemy land and build an aggressive land from that. And another nice thing about Illusionist is that when the creature transforms back into the Rakoan, it will restore its original stats. So it doesn't say this on the card anywhere, but this is just how the transform mechanic works. So if you use this Illusionist on, let's say, like Frog Tosser, this Frog Tosser will be a little bit wounded from fighting a creature, but you can use the Illusionist to bring these stats back up to a 4/4. Cannoneer is also really strong. You do need another Rakoan to sacrifice, but it essentially acts like a 2-cost Flame Burst. That Rakoan you sacrifice just gets replaced anyway by the Cannoneer, so you're not really losing a ton from it. And one of the best sack targets for this is Shield Mates. It has recently been nerfed down to a 1/2 body, but it's still quite strong because after sacrificing it, you still get another little 1/1 Rakoan that persists underneath it. So this can be one of your sort of enablers for Cannoneers, and also an enabler for Illusionist. And another enabler for these reasons is Rakoan Recruiter, since it gives you 2 creatures that you can use from it, just for the cost of this 1 card. So Shield Mates and Recruiter are very good, paired up with Cannoneers and Illusionists. And then with all of these Rakoans that you build up on the board, you've got Rakoan Champion as your win condition, and this is really strong, obviously because it gains the +1/+1 stats for each other friendly Rakoan in play, but also because it can dash, and you play this deck very defensively at first to get all of your lands built up, but when you want to push to the enemy's orb, this dash can really help to push this up aggressive, and it's also neutral, so it can come down on any of these colored lands you want to play it on, or even make a double neutral. And then we've got Rakoan Chieftain, which gives +1/+0 to all adjacent creatures, and this can get really incredible value with all of your little guys that you have to fight with. This 1 attack buff really adds up in swarm type of decks, and the dash is also really nice because it can dash into positions that very turn that you play it. A really cool synergy with this card also is pairing it up with Frog Tosser, since if Frog Tosser comes down adjacent to this, it will get that extra attack buff while it's fighting something, so you can push a little bit of extra damage with Chieftain Tosser. And then when you play this deck, you'll notice that you build up a ton of Faeria, and this just because of how cheap all of your creatures are. And also since this deck you want to build to both sides of the wells, so that When you do this, you start double collecting really early on in the game. And so with all of this mass amount of Faeria, we need some things to spend this on. And this is where you can run a lot of fun cards that you normally couldn't. So just first, I want to say that Ulani is really amazing because you are in a 4-color deck. This will draw you 4 different cards, giving you all the answers you could possibly need, and because you've got so much Faeria to spend on all these cards, Ulani is just incredible. But some of the fun ones to use also are the dragons. You've got so much Faeria to spend, so these 10-cost dragons are really powerful to have. So I'm running Tethra and Majinata, which are both very strong cards. And if you don't have these in your collection just yet, anything high costing and valuable works in these slots really. But these give you something to spend all your Faeria on. Ideally you want all of these buffs to go on to your Rakoan Reveler here, since when this dies, you gain 1 equal to this creature's attack. This isn't always easy to make work though. If you can get a really excellent trade by buffing a different creature, then you should definitely go for that instead, but Reveler is really nice synergy with this and the buffs that you're running. And then a really interesting include in this deck is Magda here. So she's usually a bit more of a meme card. A 4-cost creature with only 3 life that can't defend herself at all is usually pretty weak no matter what effect it has, but in this deck you can set up a wall of creatures to protect her, and then even if she gets flame bursted or something, it isn't a huge loss because you've got easy ways to gain more Faeria. And then if she survives, she gives you a free legendary to your hand each turn, which gives you some great things to spend your excess Faeria on. And legendaries also cost 1 less, so even this is reasonable synergy with the other 3 legendaries that are already in your deck. And the last card I want to point out is War Machine. So I've just got this as a 1-of, and I've put this in here as just an extra starting creature. The Swallow a Friendly Rakoan is a You May ability, so you don't have to do this. And playing down a 4/4 with charge 2 is still really solid on its own. And so for the mulligan, you want to look for as many creatures as you really can. And your starting creatures here are going to be Shieldmates, Rakoan Recruiter, Reveler, and then of course this War Machine that I talked about. And so the reason I only have 2 Reveler and 1 War Machine is that Reveler is really nice paired up with the buff cards, but it's pretty weak on its own, and it also can be a bit difficult sometimes to get it in a good position because you only have this 1 mountain requirement in the deck. You're trying to build up 2 forests, 2 lakes for this Frog Tosser, and then those 2 wild are going to be just 1 desert and 1 mountain. So I feel that 2 Revelers is plenty. I don't want to go any more than that, but I also wanted to have 9 starting creatures. And the reason for that is you don't want to play your Cannoneers or Illusionists, usually, unless they have targets. So these starting creatures are pretty important to get. And the only other cards that you have to play, besides these ones, are like turn 4 plays, like Chieftain, maybe Tethra, Magda. So it again just makes it really important to get one of these starting creatures. So that's why I wanted just that extra one there. And then, so once you've found at least one of these starting creatures, I like to mulligan away any high-costing things, like buffs or tossers, champions, and I try to get as many creatures to start with as I can, especially these Cannoneers and Illusionists. As long as you have a starting creature, these are amazing to keep alongside those. If you don't get any starting creatures, it can be a bit awkward. You don't want to play these 2 down unless they have targets, like I said. So if you don't get anything else to start, a 4 land card, like Magda or something, isn't the end of the world to build your lands up to, but if you really have nothing else in hand to play, and your hand's super clunky, then you can always draw, and you don't have to build up your lands. Drawing is always an option, especially if you've built at least maybe 2 or 3 different colored lands already. Then most of the things that you draw into can be played right away anyways. So for alternative cards for this deck, some things you can consider are like Crystal Flower, and this can be kind of a nice removal because it's sort of like a pseudo hard removal card. You get to swallow a creature, and at the end of turn deal 1 damage to this. So at the end of 5 turns, essentially, or if this gets dealt damage by any other means, then this swallowed creature will escape from its prison, and that right there is what kind of throws me off a bit, because if you use this Crystal Flower, you really need to push a huge advantage over your opponent or close out the game and win in these 5 turns. Otherwise, by the end of this 5 turns, the creature escapes, and now you've just spent 4 Faeria to do nothing, essentially. So this type of card was a lot stronger in other decks when it used to be just a wild cost. Other decks that could push up really aggressive and just close out the game in these 5 turns. In Rakoans, though, this is quite the slower style deck, as I was saying before, so you don't usually have a lot of tools to close out the game in 5 turns. You do have your champions and things. It can work. It's very good at dealing with something huge, massively scary, but I don't like it so much. You can play around with this card though, of course. Crystal Spice is another card that's really nice for this deck, because you get 2 non-legendary cards that cost 7 or more. So this is something that you can spend your mass amounts of Faeria on, so you could consider swapping this in for like Magda or the dragons if you don't have it, or you don't like those so much. And this can get you some really nice cards sometimes. Biomancer is another Rakoan that you could include, and this one's kind of nice because it lets you draw a non-blue creature from your deck, and you've got plenty of those to draw into. So this can be kind of nice for that reason. I don't like it as much as the other cards, though, in here. Drawing into cards is really nice. Again, that gives you stuff to spend your Faeria on, but I just don't see a huge place for it, and it's 4 land cost, which is quite pricey. I just prefer the Ulani a lot more than the Biomancer here. But again, it's definitely a card to include. Synergizes with Rakoans still. One that I don't have in here that's kind of nice is Aurora. Because your creatures have such small bodies, this changing their stats to a 6/6 can be really powerful. The only reason that I don't have her really is that she has 3 lakes, and that is not in our land requirements here, which isn't the worst. Like, if you just play 1 card that's 1 land higher than your requirement, it's not the worst to use, but I don't particularly like doing this. I like sticking to my land requirement very strictly. But this is a card to consider. There's another Rakoan in green, Priest of Everlife. So this is another one that you could consider. It enables your Rakoans again, and it's pretty solid for what it does. It gives the next creature you draw +2/+4. So it's kind of like a Elderwood Embrace, sort of. And then you also get a body along with that Elderwood Embrace. This is super powerful if it triggers on Frog Tossers, but don't count on that. It's pretty unlikely to have. Also the Revelers, it's not bad to hit as well. I don't like this too much because it forces you to build 2 forests. So if you want to use this as a starting creature, you can try this, but again, you've got to build 2 forests, and I prefer building all of my different colored lands as soon as I can, just to give me as many options as possible throughout the game. And then some other cards are in red. So Garrodan's a card to consider as well. Again, 2 mountains is not in our land requirement, but you could decide to go up to this. It would make your land requirement 7, but Garrodan can be pretty powerful, and it's like a 10 cost thing that you can just pool your Faeria into. So this isn't a bad consideration. And then, kind of similarly to Garrodan, is Rakoacopter. And this, again, is a Rakoan as well. So, -1, deal 2 damage to adjacent enemy creatures. Again, needs that 2 mountains. But if you decide to put 2 mountains in your deck, this can be quite nice at just having some AoE clear damage, and even using Rakoacopter on just to clear 1 creature is pretty solid, because you've spent 5 to essentially deal 2 damage, and you get a 3/3 body. So that's not bad stats, even as it is there. But if you're putting the 2 mountains in also, something to consider on top of that is putting Emerald Salamander in. So this deals 2 damage to adjacent enemy creatures, and then gives any adjacent friendly creatures +2/+2. And this is a really strong card in Swarm style decks, just like we have here. So if you've built up to 2 mountains, you could consider throwing this Emerald Salamander in. This pairs really nicely, of course, with Revelers also. And if you've included this extra mountain, it also makes your Revelers a lot easier to come down, because like I said, it's only a 1 mountain requirement in this list, so sometimes Revelers are a little awkward to come down. So it can help a little bit if you boost up to 2 mountains. So you've got 6 very specific lands required for this deck. You need to build 2 forests, 2 lake, 1 desert, and 1 mountain. So you want to be somewhat careful on where you put all of these lands. Like I mentioned earlier, this deck wants to build to both sides of the wells and be really defensive until it's built up all of its colored lands. And you always want to be building to your hand in terms of colors. So here, since I've got a Recruiter and an Illusionist, I'm going to want to be building lake, forest, and desert. And then afterwards I'll want to build mountain and desert up towards this chieftain. And even if you're not going to play like chieftain immediately, it's a lot better to build towards these colors rather than build colors that you don't need right away. So, like I said, your starting creatures here are going to be Shieldmates, Recruiter, and Reveler, and also War Machine. So if it's Reveler, of course, you build Mountain first, but with like Recruiter or Shieldmates, I always like to build a Forest first here. And one reason is because you have a 2 forest requirement, so you never want to clump the same colored lands next to each other. You always want your colors to be diversely located on the board so that you can have more flexibility in where you drop your creatures in the future. So playing forest first means that I can put a different colored land here, and then on the next turn I can put my second forest here, which is a great Tethra spot, by the way, since it's got charge 2 for collection, or I could put that forest onto the opposite side, and this way that these 2 forests won't be clumped next to each other. So Recruiter is the best start you could get, in my opinion, especially having the Explorer, because it gives you a potential double collection on turn 3. So after my forest is built here, I'm going to put my lake somewhere on the opposite side, so that I can play both the Recruiter and the 1/1 Rakoan. And which side you put this 3/4 body on can sometimes depend on your opponent's opening play. So here he's decided to rush down the center, but in a lot of cases, because he's going first, they're forced to invest down one particular side already, and they may likely drop a creature like here, or maybe in the center tile if they're a jump creature. So if it is like a jump creature like Water Elemental or something, it's going to be able to jump over to this side of the well on the next turn, and then it's going to be able to contest this spot on that next turn. So you're going to want to try and get to the well first before he can jump over there, and we can do that by going explore lake here, and drop your recruiter down here, and then we can put this 1/1 Rakoan here. So here I've got another recruiter, but it's just from all the cards that he gave me. So normally I would just have to put this 1/1 down here. And with this play, it means that you get to collect next turn, but if that elemental decides to jump up and you've got no answers for it, you have the option to retreat, and at least you've gotten that one collection there. But if you have Illusionist in hand, though, you don't need to retreat, since the Dune Drake that it transforms this guy into can charge up and contest this spot here if the Water Ellie were to jump there. But for this reason, most players won't jump to this spot to play around that line. They might tuck in the corner or switch sides. But this also means that you can sort of bluff that you have the Illusionist in hand, even if you don't. And they're likely to switch sides or awkwardly tuck in the corner there anyways. And here, I think I would always put the 3/4 body on this fighting side, if I can, because it won't easily get removed, so you'll always have something to contest this side. If I swapped these places and the 1/1s here, he might be able to, like, remove it with Emperor's Command, Soul Drain, anything like that, and then freely be able to jump over here. But a 3/4 is a lot more difficult to deal with. But the other thing that could happen is maybe he extends down the same side that your already built land is on. So in this situation, if you want to put these two creatures on both of these sides and have a creature remaining here, then you're going to have to go with Lake here, Explore here, and then since this is a neutral card, the 1/1 will have to go into this spot instead of this play. And that's just how it has to go, but at least you still have something that can threaten that Dune Drake line, and if it gets removed, oh well, but that's the play that I would still do here. So after all of that, you just want to play your next lands to your hand, like I mentioned before, and if you already have all the lands that are required for your hand, building your first lake, or even your first forest if you haven't done that yet, is good to prioritize next, since you need 2 of these type of lands anyway. The first land that you play can almost be thrown out wherever, and worst case, if you draw like a lake creature and the placement of that lake is in a bad spot, you're still able to build your second lake there. So after you've built up these 4 lands here, extending to both sides of the wells, you have a couple of options for the next 2, and this really depends what your opponent is doing. So a lot of this deck is reacting to what your opponent plays. So if they're being super aggressive, like he is right now, going straight down the center, you may want to build even more defensive lands by putting them here or here. And that's true also if they're maybe like jump and they're really quickly getting to your orb, or maybe they're like blue-yellow tempo, they're really quickly pushing towards your orb in some way, then you could put a defensive land to block in this spot here. But otherwise, you could either try to push your lands up aggressive yourself down one particular side, especially if you have Illusionist in hand to push those creatures up quickly, or buffs to fight with, or champions, or you could just try to take control of this side of the wells, get in between the wells here, and just rack up even more collection that way. The only other interesting start is having War Machine going second. I like to start here with a lake center, and then on turn 2 go Explore, Mountain, and drop War Machine here. And I like this spot because it puts it in a position where it can contest the sides of the wells, So this Wind Wisp now is kind of in a awkward spot where it can't collect here. But if this ever needs like a path to retreat or something, then it's got this path to retreat here. And I started with Lake Center here because, as I mentioned before, this first lake can be kind of used as a throwaway spot, and you don't have any other creatures that would benefit from being played here in the center tile. Revelers can only be played on mountains, so this singular mountain within your requirement is much more important of where it gets placed. If you don't have the Explorer, though, I would still only extend to these sides instead of starting center. It's just since you can't immediately claim this well spot, so I think sides is still better in this situation. But alright, so I've talked enough. Let's get into a match now. So this is great. I've got 2 starting creatures even, so I'm going to keep both of these, toss away the buff. And that's excellent to see. So here, because I've got Cannoneer in hand, I'm actually going to build towards my Shield Maids first. Since this will require 3 colors, whereas Recruiter Cannoneer takes 4 colors. He's playing green, so I might not have a target for this. Oh, I also have Illusionist, though. So that could be interesting, because he could go explore land. So I could have something here to fight with Illusionist. Yeah, but I can do that still with Shield Mates. So I will put my Shield Mates here. So this still gives me that Illusionist line to put my Lake on this side, or Cannoneer. I've got a choice here. Just deciding to stay in between the wells. Stalker. Okay, so it's okay. He had the full clear for that. So that's... oh. Okay. So that wasn't too bad, but now that he's used both Stalker and Command, it's going to be really difficult for him to remove that Magda. So I'm just going to set up some double collection here for next turn. Okay, so he stepped this into range of my Illusionist. So that will be nice for me. So I'll go for my Mountain, build up towards this Cannoneer. Not that I'm going to use it. I think that Illusionist is probably better to get out. Which one is better? I think Illusionist, since Illusionist is a lot easier for him to play around. I do lose out on 1 more damage, but I think that's okay. Oh, I can't play this anyways. Oh, I could. Okay, actually, I've changed my mind. Because this is mono green, I think I'm going to use the 3 damage, because that extra damage might come in handy later. So I'll step this back and Cannoneer this. And then I want to get Magda down as soon as possible. So I'll have to put her over here. I don't want to put her in a spot where it's in range of all this stuff that's coming down. This might get awkward if he has another Stalker to deal with this, and then my Illusionist's a bit dead. Oh my. That's
Welcome to my
a Magda
court.
of her own. His own, I don't know. I assume it's a he. Azrai. So I'm going to put my forest here in a sort of spot for Tethra. So let's see, if I play Shield Mates this turn, I go down to 5, and I should be able to collect back up to 10 Faeria next turn. So I'm pretty confident playing this. Playing that Shield Mates just ensures my collection. Potentially gives me a Illusionist line as well. Okay, so going back to that turn earlier where I played Cannoneer, it would have been better to play the Illusionist there, because now I don't have an easy answer there for the Magda. Tethra will be nice to clean this up. Oh, I got a Ulani off of that. It's too bad I have no way of dealing with this. Tethra is the only way that I can clear this guy. Actually, Ulani might be able to get me something. Might be able to get me a Cannoneer. So if I play this, I'm down to 7. I won't be able to Tethra though. I think I can hold out one more turn and just try and take this favorable trade this turn. So let's do that. Could build my lake. Yeah, let's just do that. Push this into a double collection spot. I don't need that extra lake just yet. This should have moved up, but... so he missed a collection there. Could have teleported into this one. Ariana. That might be a nice one for him. Rapala. That's actually excellent, because it doesn't cost me anything. I can flood his hand with fish. So, okay. Now I can actually clear that Magda. So I can kill this. Let's move these guys. Rapala will come here, for sure, I think. Need a spot for Illusionist, which can come here. I like the 7 attack. It feels not great to get rid of that. So maybe I Ulani first. Let's put this here.
Put a smile on that face.
So Ulani could get me Cannoneer, which is what I'm looking for. Need an Illusionist spot still, and I want this to be a lake, so Ulani's gonna have to come here. We did get the Cannoneer. Excellent. Okay. Alright. So that worked out in our favor. And I keep this 7 attack alive to fight his big green stuff. If he decides to clear it, that's fine.
You are tiny.
Ooh, he's gonna get a lot of Faeria from that. So I've got this in a spot where it can illusion, hit something into there. Oh my. Uh-oh. That's not good. Okay, I don't like tree. That is something I'm gonna have to deal with. Champion could be my answer to that. So let's step up and clear this. So if I champion, I can always +1, giving me 3 Faeria, which doesn't let me spend that on anything. So Illusionist is probably a thing that comes down. I'm just gonna swim this fish upwards. I need to get rid of cards in my hand because I've got so much now. I think Illusionist is fine. So I've got 10 damage here. So let's drop a double neutral. And I'm gonna have to take this damage while I have it. Might as well collect. I think that's okay. I've still got this line where I can illusion this guy. Oh my, he got an 8/8 fish. Stalker. Okay. Oh my. The second Rapala. Amazing. So I think I should have the clear here. I can buff this to kill this, and then Tosser is an answer to that. So that costs me 7. Yeah, so 7. I suppose I can just play the Rapala, burn another card of his. Okay, so 7, and then I've got 2 Faeria for nothing else. Alright, so I'll just be +1ing then instead, I think. Oh. Problem with Tosser. If the frog spawns here, I don't have the clear. So is there any other way I can do that?
Let's put a smile on that face.
Could draw for Cannoneer. I think I just have to go for this. It's pretty likely that it doesn't spawn in that spot. Okay, that's good. We'll just swim the fish up. +1. Push these guys up. Alright. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to check out my Twitch channel and also my Discord channel. I'll leave links down in the description below. On Discord we have some channels set up to discuss all of these deck strategy guides that I've built, and anything else, maybe you want some help with deck building, you can feel free to join that. Other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.